discussion that I think is the most important thing. Okay. I have a PowerPoint, but I didn't bring it because Tammy just asked about this today. So, but anyway, you're under what they call a weak mayor council system, and by that, what that means is that in a city like St. Cloud, that's a strong mayor. There, the mayor has many administrative powers. He can hire and fire. He can direct staff. Many functions like that. That is not the case in a statutory city like Kimball or any of the other smaller cities in Stearns County. It's what they call a weak mayor council. And that's the most common form of council in Minnesota. The council itself has administrative as well as legislative authority, and the council is the one that's ultimately responsible for the operation of the city. And the mayor's powers are no greater than those of any other council member, except the mayor has the responsibility as being the presiding officer at council meetings. That's essentially the only additional power that the mayor has. Otherwise, the mayor acts as any other council member. Pardon me? The mayor is the presiding officer, yeah. But also a regular member of the city council. Okay, the mayor has all the powers and duties of the office of the council members in addition to those of the mayor. And the mayor usually serves as the city's representative before the Minnesota legislature or any federal agencies and other local government. And the mayor performs the ceremonial duties on behalf of the community. I mean, and the mayor can do it with other council members too, but generally the mayor is the one that represents the city at different functions like that. Okay. I don't know if it's ever come up here, but in some cities, the power to make appointment can get to be a real battle at the beginning of the year. And so I just briefly want to go through that. The power to appoint usually resides with the council. Now, I do know it's the custom and practice that the mayor appoints and then the council approves, but in some cases, the council has disagreed with the mayor and the mayor says, I have the right to appoint, but in most cases, the right to appoint rests with the council, not with the mayor. But as a practical matter, the mayor usually makes up the list and then the council approves. But I just want to make sure that you realize that ultimately it's the council that does it. Now there are a few exceptions. Another important thing is that the mayor of a statutory city may not hire or fire city employees. That is a function of the council again. And that from time to time has been a problem and it hasn't only rested with the mayor, but sometimes with council members, where a council member or a mayor will believe that they can direct staff. They don't have that right. As an individual, you do not have a right to direct staff. That is a function of the council as a whole. And what has happened in some cases is that a council member would start looking through personnel records and making comments, and that clearly is inappropriate. The only one who can do that is the clerk. A council member or mayor could do that if there's a need, is there's a legitimate need. And that may happen where you have a personnel committee and you're looking into some issue with an employee, you may have to look at their employee records. And in that case, you can, but it's got to be a specific need. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
The whole council, you have right.
Well, no, sometimes I can give you the example. There may be a complaint about an employee, and there has to be some type of investigation. So the council appoints two people to look into it. And then in that case, they would have a right to look at records and that kind of stuff.
Would that necessarily have to be a personnel committee?
It wouldn't have to be. It could be, let's say that someone makes a complaint about, oftentimes it's the police department. Well, then the council will appoint two people. I'm just going on past experience. Yeah. And so then they would appoint two people to look into that. Well, they would have the right then. There's a need to know for them to look at that information. Then they go back to the council and report on it. And generally, that reporting will be in a closed meeting, because if there's a complaint about someone, you can close the meeting about, how you're gonna handle it, so. But that's how that would work. But what I have to warn you about is that just because a person is a council member or a mayor, you don't have a right to start looking through personnel records. You don't have a right to say, employee X, do this, do that. If you observe an employee doing something that you don't like, then that's gotta be brought to the council, and the council as a whole can say, employee X, do this and that. But that's a function of the council as a whole, so. Okay. Okay, the role of the mayor as the presiding officer is the mayor recognizes speakers for debate and motions. The mayor rules on questions of council procedure, and the mayor can vote on all motions put before the council, but does not have the right to veto council actions. There's no veto power. Whereas the mayor in the city of St. Cloud does have veto power, but does not have a right to vote, so. And importantly, the mayor has an obligation to be impartial and objective in conducting the meetings. Do you have any rules of order here? Do you adopt any rules for meetings? Okay, that's fine. I mean, some councils adopt the Robert's Rules of Orders, and those are not the rules to adopt. They're for very large organizations, and if you start looking at them, even the simplified versions of the Robert's Rules of Order, they're incredibly complex and hard to understand. The league has a very simple, modified approach to running meetings, and if you ever run into a problem, that's one you should use. Okay, the next section is City Council and its powers. That council members, including the mayor's, duties are to be performed by the council as a whole. So that's at a duly called meeting, and that's where your power comes. And it is a tremendous power, but it's acting as a whole. The council, not individual members, must supervise administrative officers, formulate policies, and exercise city powers. Duties of city employees are the responsibility of the council as a whole. And I've gone into that already. That as an individual, you don't have that right to tell a person do this or do that. As individuals, council members and the mayor cannot give orders or otherwise supervise city employees unless specifically directed to do so by the council. So in some instances, you tell the personnel committee, okay, you're gonna review the employees at this time of the year, and then they'll go out and review the employees. So that's how that is. So the council as a whole can tell one or two council members to investigate something, but those two members don't have any right to actually formulate policy or action. They have to go back to the council, and the council acts as a whole again. And as a council, the council members have complete authority over all administrative affairs in the city. So that would include all departments. Okay, delegation of council power. The city councils may not delegate legislative or quasi-judicial power unless authorized to do so by the legislature. So do you have a park board here? Okay, the park board is the only board that has some specific powers. Otherwise, any other boards you create are advisory only. So they come to you, and then they provide you with their advice, but you have to act on it. They don't have any power in and of themselves. And do you understand what I mean by legislative authority? That is that the council has a tremendous amount of discretion in determining what type of ordinances they want. Okay, quasi-judicial would be like in terms of a variance or a conditional use permit. And you're much more limited in what your powers are there, because you gotta base your actions on the facts that are presented before you and what the law is. And so quasi-judicial actions of the council are always more subject to lawsuits, so you gotta be very careful in those type of things. Okay, the council may not delegate any administrative power to a council committee, to administrative officer, to an advisory board, or to an individual council member. So when you appoint these subcommittees, they're basically fact-finding, and then they come back to the council and the council acts. Yeah, now, independent citizen boards and commissions, again, they're advisory only. They come back to you with their reports, and then you have to act on it. Now, do you have an EDA? Okay. A park board is the only exception. I mean, the EDA would be an exception too. But a park board does have some specific powers that they can act on their own. Pardon me? Yes. The EDA, yeah. Or the HRA, if you would have an HRA too. So with respect to these advisory boards, the council can create them and the council can dissolve them at their discretion. And again, you can't legislate any type of, you can't delegate rather any legislative or discretionary powers to those boards. Okay, how does the council administer the city affairs? Well, one, the council may appoint employees necessary for the proper management and operation of the city. So with respect to city hall functions and administrative functions, you appoint a city clerk, and then they administer the affairs of the city. The same with the police department. You appoint a police chief, and then the chief administers the affairs of the department. So if you have an issue with, let's say, a police officer or an employee of the city, you go back, let's say you observe something as a council member, then you go back to the council. You don't start directing that employee. And then the council works through the chain of command. You work through the clerk, or you work through the fire chief, or you work through the police chief. In terms of the day-to-day functions. Obviously, if there's a big issue, that's got to be decided by the council. Now, with respect to hiring and firing, the administrator, or the fire, or the police chief may not hire and fire employees. That's a role for the council, and I believe the fire departments are coming more and more in line with those rules too. The administrator may not make purchases and let contracts. That's a role for the council. Now, the council can set some standards in terms of purchasing, with respect to the statutory law, and I'm not going to go into that, but you can set limits, as far as what the clerk can purchase and what they can't purchase. So that's basically it. I mean, that's in a nutshell what the powers of a city council are. So, any questions? Pardon me?
Just a good reminder.
Yeah. Well, things must be running fairly smoothly because sometimes I have nothing but questions as I go through this. So. Okay, I think that covers all the things you wanted me to cover, Tammy.